Thanks for having me. This is a fairly fast session. We usually run longer sessions, but we can pack this in for you because I know you've got a packed schedule. A few techniques on how to challenge poor behavior in the workplace. So I'm just going to share my screen as I speak, and this should all work pretty seamlessly. Stand by, and on your screen now, you should see a slide which tells you that that's what we're going to be talking about now. And so this is a session which is split really into two perspectives. I want you to look at this through two lenses. Firstly, in case you are the target of poor behavior in the workplace. Secondly, in case you witness it as a third party or if you become aware of it in some other way. There are some discussion points as we go further along where I'm going to ask you to take part in a couple of polls, so be ready for those. And really, what I want to say to you first of all is that there are very good reasons why we don't like to speak up. It very often goes down to our herd instinct because we are programmed, just like lots of herd animals, not to stand out from the crowd. It's not very comfortable standing out because, for obvious reasons, if you stand out from your herd, it often doesn't end well. And we still have that programming within us. The main reasons why we don't like to speak up are on your screen. On the top left, the first one is social. Nobody really wants to be that one person who doesn't laugh at the jokes, that one person who doesn't go along with the banter, even if the banter is going a bit too far at times. Over on the right of the screen, audience inhibition, that idea that I don't want to be the only one speaking up because, again, it makes me feel a bit vulnerable. Very often, it's probably worth knowing, I mean, we work with hundreds of companies all around the world, and we see this all the time, that as soon as one person speaks up, actually they give permission to others and they kind of follow. I worked in an organization very briefly where one person was finally challenged for their behavior after quite a long time of behaving quite poorly. And within 24 hours, about 16 or 17 other people came forward because one person finally spoke up. But there is this fear that you might be the only one who ever spoke up. And as a result of that, we don't like to. On the bottom left, you'll also see the fear of retaliation. You worry that someone might get their own back. Somebody might actually just use their authority or their power or even their social influence to make your life difficult or to put barriers in the way of your career. On the right of the screen at the bottom, the diffusion of responsibility. That's another big reason. This idea that it's not my problem. Don't we have bosses? Don't we have an HR team? Isn't it their job to promote a positive workplace culture? Well, the answer is, of course, that it is their job. They are paid to promote a positive workplace culture. But again, we've all got a bit of a stake in it, haven't we? I always liken it to health and safety. If you were at work and you saw a clear health and safety hazard, for example, it might be an electric cable which was sparking and was a bit too close to some water on the floor. You might think, that looks a bit dodgy, but you wouldn't think to yourself, but I don't work in the health and safety team, so I'm not going to say anything about that. I'll leave it until someone from the health and safety team spots it. You wouldn't, would you? You would raise a concern, you would let someone know. And I always say, thinking about poor behaviors like bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, intimidation, that kind of stuff, that is a health and safety hazard. It's just not as visible. It's a psychological health hazard. So it's quite good to see it like that if you possibly can, because it really does help us to think about things more clearly. Now, on your screen there, 3 images that I think you will be pretty familiar with. I'll just take you through them because there's an interesting story attached to each. The first one is the logo of Top Gear. I'm sure you know what Top Gear is. It's a TV show. It's all about fast cars. Very famously, some time back, one of its presenters, Jeremy Clarkson, was fired from Top Gear because he punched one of his producers. Now, I was at the BBC at the time. I remember it really well. They were out filming. They got back to their hotel a little bit late. And when they got back to their hotel, the kitchen had closed, the chef had gone home, and Jeremy Clarkson wanted steak for dinner, but he couldn't have steak. So what did he do? He lost his temper and he ended up punching one of his producers in front of everybody else from the program, and he punched him more than once. Now, obviously everyone was horrified by this, and it was escalated. It went to the very top of the BBC, to the Director General at the time. The news traveled fast. When this happened, it actually made the BBC's bulletins very, very quickly. And so we all knew about it. And we thought the big question on our lips was, what is the BBC going to do about this? The trouble is the BBC took quite a long time to decide what it was going to do. And as a result of that, there was a lot of fear. A lot of people were talking and they were saying, wow, you know, I wonder if they're finding a way out of this. I wonder if they're trying to find a way of not taking action against Jeremy Clarkson because of who he was. I wonder if this is a case of special rules for special people. Now, you might be familiar with that principle. It happens all over the place, where we sometimes find ways of allowing certain individuals to behave in a way that we wouldn't allow others to behave because of who they are. It's usually people that enjoy a kind of high status within an organization. It might be they've been around for a long time. It might be that they're very senior. It might be that they're valued in some way. And as a result of that, we kind of make excuses. Now, I should stress that the BBC did actually end his contract, but they just took a while. And that was why people were worried, because it can happen so commonly that people just are allowed to behave poorly because of the status they enjoy. Now, this process is called normalization. It's when we normalize a certain person's behavior because of the status they enjoy, and we find excuses to let them do it. If you ever find yourself saying, oh, that's just the way he is, or she's old school, we have to remember that. Or, you know, some of these presenters, that's just the way we are. We just have to put up with it. This is really easy in radio because that's what a lot of people say. I've found myself saying it myself in radio when I worked there. And the thing is, as a result of that, we often find excuses to kind of just justify that behavior, often subconsciously. Now, if you look at the man in the middle, Jimmy Savile, we know who he was. He's obviously dead now. During his lifetime, he was a national treasure, as you know. He's holding his knighthood there. That's how much of a national treasure he was. Sir Jimmy Savile. After he died, we know what was revealed. He had used his celebrity status to get access to countless underage girls. Now, I heard that language myself, the language of normalization. I heard people saying, well, even during his lifetime, there were rumors, of course, and people were saying, well, he's just a bit eccentric, isn't he? Or, you know, these sort of old school presenters, you just have to treat them with kid gloves, but they're kind of okay, really. I think they're just a bit different. They're a different breed. Don't forget, he does a lot for charity. This is the language of normalization. And if you hear the word just, it's very often a bit of an alarm bell. So if you hear it's just the way they are, it's just the way things are here, that word just can very often just tell you that something might be slightly wrong. Don't forget, Jimmy Savile went to his grave unpunished. That is the power of normalization, where we can just go into a state of almost like collective denial, convincing ourselves that it's actually okay if they do it, even though we wouldn't allow others. The test is, would I allow somebody else to behave like that? And if the answer is yes, then maybe there's something that might not be quite right. On the right of your screen, Harvey Weinstein, okay, he was the godfather of Hollywood, we know that. But again, a convicted rapist now, we also know that. But in his court case, it came out, people were saying, well, you know, you kind of knew that if you appeared on one of Harvey Weinstein's movies, then he could win you an Oscar. He was the godfather of Hollywood. You kind of also knew that if you were a woman, you probably didn't want to spend too much time alone with him because, and here we go again, that's just the way Harvey was. There's that word again, just. So you can see what happens there. Special rules for special people, they can easily creep in. Now, in radio, it happens a lot, as I know. I've seen it myself. So I just want to ask you a personal question. I absolutely do not want you to answer it. Just quietly, silently, in your head. Just ask yourself now, is this ringing a bell? Is it resonating with you? Are you thinking, yeah, I know what you mean. I think we might be normalizing someone's behavior right now, okay, where I work. If the answer is yes, then a very, very good way of thinking about it is like this. What is the behavior that's going on? Let me identify precisely what the behavior is. Now, starting on the left there, is it bullying? Is it cyberbullying? Is it harassment? Now, they're the obvious ones, aren't they? We know what they are. So this is not a session on what bullying is, for example. We know what it is. But all I'm going to say is that if you think you're being bullied, or if you know somebody else who's being bullied or harassed, then please, please do consider speaking up. And I'm going to show you some techniques shortly on how to do that. If you look at the yellow box underneath there, you'll also see a word that's used a lot these days, microaggressions, micro behaviors. Let me just be really clear. about what they are. They are behaviors that are really hard to put your finger on. It's when somebody, if you look at my face now, I'll demonstrate this to you. You might be speaking in a meeting, or you might even be giving a presentation or something, and you see somebody else, they look at a colleague or a friend, look at my face, and they do this. They go like that. It's really quick and it's really subtle. I'll do it again in case you missed it. They roll their eyes really quickly. Now, what does that mean? Are they undermining you? Quite possibly, very possibly. But also, they might be talking about somebody else. They might be having a completely separate conversation. They might even be moaning about the temperature in the room or the timing of the meeting. You see what I mean? It's a microaggression. You're not quite sure. And as a result of that, we don't feel particularly confident in calling it out or challenging it, because there's a strong chance we might have got the wrong end of the stick, and therefore we feel a bit of a fool. Another really common microaggression, by the way, is if you're speaking in a meeting, for example, or giving a presentation, and someone's like this, they're on their phone and they're doing all this, and they might even have a slightly sort of sullen expression on their face at the time. Now, is that directed at you? Possibly they're doing it to undermine you, but possibly they're not. Maybe they do that in every meeting. Maybe they check their emails in meetings. Maybe they've got childcare problems and they're urgently trying to sort that out with their text messages. You're not quite sure. So as a result, you don't want to say, are you looking at your phone to undermine me? Because you just wouldn't do it. You don't feel confident enough in your own beliefs that behavior is actually taking place. So when this was tested by some psychologists, they got together with some focus groups, and their job was, okay, people don't like challenging microaggressions. So how do we do it? How do you respond? Because it's really important to respond. If people start behaving like this in your workplace, it takes on an almost like a life of its own. It becomes normalized, and people start copying it, particularly more junior people or new people or impressionable people. They think, oh, that's how we roll here. So they start doing it themselves. And the culture then takes on a slightly toxic feel to it. So when they tested it, they found that the best way to respond to micro behaviors is actually with another micro behavior. So what you do is you deliberately misunderstand it. So for example, if you're talking and someone rolls their eyes like that, you might quickly look up at the ceiling like that, as if you just wondered what they were looking at just then. And you see what I've done. You don't have to say anything. You see what I've done. I've just deliberately misunderstood the behavior. I've innocently taken it at face value, but it gave me a channel to respond and show that I saw it. And they're not expecting a response. Micro behaviors don't expect responses. That's the whole point of them. So if you just respond in an innocent way, by pretending to misunderstand it, they found that it tends to get people to correct the behavior. So similarly, if someone's doing the old phone thing, you know, they're checking their messages with a sullen face like that, then you might sort of smile and say, oh, look, yeah, I can see a few people are just checking messages at the moment. Do you know what? I've got some messages to check as well. Can we just take a 2-minute break? We can all check for messages. And then after that, we'll carry on with no phones, if that's okay. So again, I've highlighted the behavior, but innocently and in a non-confrontational way. Now, elsewhere in the yellow box, you'll also see rolling eyes at meetings. That's what we've just done. Look at sighing loudly. When you ask a question, when someone says, you ask a question, just before they answer, they go, like that, and then they answer. Well, how do you pretend to misunderstand that? You might sort of say, yeah, actually, is anyone else hot? Can we open a window? Can we turn on the aircon or something like that, just to deliberately misunderstand it? You'll also see interrupting a person mid-sentence repeatedly. Ever been in that meeting? Particularly true for people who might be slightly more introverted, less confident in meetings. If people are being spoken over, they're not getting to the end of their point. Do you know what? The best thing to do is just put it right if you can. So if somebody's not making their point, just turn to them and say, do you know what? Can you say that again? I'm really sorry. I missed the end of that. Or I was taking notes and I wasn't listening. It sounded really interesting. Can you just say that again? If anyone in any meeting invites somebody else to repeat themselves, the meeting will usually allow that to happen. And the meeting will also register that something has just been put right. Similarly, if it says they're taking more questions from men than women. Have you ever been in that meeting? It's not just men and women, by the way. It could be any groups, obviously. But if a group of people don't seem to be able to speak in a meeting, just turn to one of them and say, what do you think about that? What's your opinion on that? Actually, you've done some work on that, haven't you? Just get them talking. Most meetings will allow it. Now, I just want to say it's really important that this is not always deliberate, okay? So I'm not going to demonize everybody who talks over people at meetings, right? I've done it myself. Some people are just enthusiastic. They're dominant people and they like to talk in meetings and they might not realize. But whether it's deliberate or not, just put it right, get the people that are not talking, and the meeting will usually allow it. Over on the right of the screen, you will see some more explicit behaviors. For example, at the top there, inappropriate or offensive humor. Now, I just want to be clear, that doesn't mean all humor. We are allowed to have fun, but just be careful of humiliation. That's humor with an unfair target. I just want to say, if people are being humiliated, particularly on a repetitive basis, they will very often suffer in silence. They will not say that they're not finding it funny, or they won't even show it. They will often even laugh along with it. They'll pretend to find it funny. So just keep an eye out as a third party. If you think that's going on, try to put a stop to it, because no one really should get to go home after work feeling a bit rotten about themselves, particularly on a repetitive basis. Moving further down the list there's what I call the real world. Raising voices, being rude, swearing, guilty, Your Honour, I've done them all. That's not what we're talking about. We're all human. Sometimes we have a bad day, but just keep an eye open for the person who does this repeatedly, systematically, deliberately, going out of their way to make people feel bad. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. Try to put a stop to that if you possibly can. In the yellow boxes on the right underneath, just do keep an eye open too for practices and procedures that may not be fair. Don't forget, practices and procedures are written by humans. They're not always perfect. So it might be the timing of a meeting particularly, or it might be how you handle childcare or annual leave locally. If it's not fair on everybody, and sometimes when they're written, they are fair and they become unfair over time when new people come along and old people leave. And you know that's fine. But the point is just call out the way you do things if you think it's not fair, and ask for a review of how that's done. Finally, at the end, aggressive emails, that old chestnut. Okay, just to say they're easily done. Okay, just if you're going to send an aggressive email, take a step back from the keyboard, all right, and try to pick the phone up. It's harder to be aggressive on the phone or face to face because you can see them or hear them than just by email. And also, if anyone ever copies you into an aggressive email and you think that's because they want to try to humiliate somebody else, it's like a public humiliation, you are allowed to say, look, take me off the copy line here. I don't want to be on the toxic CC. I don't need to see this. It's perfectly fine to do that. Okay, so let me introduce you then to our big technique. It's called the 4 Ds. Now, the 4 Ds, well spotted. There are 4 of them. They begin with D. That's why it's called the 4 Ds. However, it's got a magic psychological quality to it. The 4 Ds is an excellent device which helps us to override one of those human instincts that I mentioned earlier that is not particularly helpful anymore. Now, we share this instinct with loads of other animals, right? It's really common. It's our instinctive response to shock or threat or fear. If we're suddenly shocked, startled, or made to feel vulnerable or in danger, we freeze. Now, if you think about it, it makes total sense. If I'm in a herd or a flock or whatever group you want to call it, if a predator comes along, like a lion, for example, then obviously my response, if I freeze, means I'm going to blend into the numbers and I'm highly likely to survive, because that lion's attention is probably going to be attracted to the one that tries to run, or the one whose baby cries, or the one that treads on a twig or something like that. But if I blend and I don't move, I don't breathe, I don't make a sound, then the numbers are on my side. That doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. And that's why instinctively we have learned to freeze. By the way, if the lion does look at you and decides that you are lunch after all, then the next ones kick in, fight or flight. And at that point, the adrenaline rushes and you go to either outrun the lion or fight the lion off. Okay. Now, I don't need to tell you, do I, that as a human being, the chances of surviving if you try to outrun a lion or fight off that lion are not particularly high. So therefore, freezing is the first response because it's the most successful. The problem is we've brought this age-old instinct into our workplace with us, and it doesn't really help. It's gone out of date. Instincts do go out of date. If you don't believe me, ask your nearest rabbit. Rabbits freeze in front of headlights. Okay, not a great survival instinct, but they just haven't worked it out yet. They need to know, they need to evolve at some point and work out when it's headlights, you run that way or that way, but they're still freezing. We're doing it by freezing in the workplace. If somebody behaves in a way that makes us feel vulnerable, we freeze right now. Come on, it doesn't make any sense logically, because if you do that, even the worst workplace bully is not going to eat you, right? They're not going to eat you, but your instincts say they might. And then the voice of self-doubt kicks in. It's the voice that says, well, maybe I just imagined that anyway. Or maybe they talk like that to everybody. Or maybe that's just the way things are here and I'm just overreacting. And the voice of self-doubt just tells you not to do anything about it, and we end up doing nothing. The 4 Ds helps us to override that. It gives us 4 logical options to choose from at the moment that logic fails us and all those silly instincts kick in and we freeze. So as soon as you think of the 4 Ds, it gives you a way forward and it kickstarts the logical process of your brain again, so you can just make a calm decision. Do I take direct action? Do I cause a distraction? Do I delegate or do I delay? And so let's just have a quick look at what they entail. Let's look at direct action. That means calling it out. Do something now. Intervene directly. Point to the elephant in the room if there is one. Do we all know what's going on, but no one's talking about? Give public support to anyone who's being targeted. Okay, is anyone being targeted here? Look after them. Say, look, I'll take you for a coffee afterwards. Calm anyone down. De-escalate the situation if emotions are running high. Use your body language to show disapproval. That means show on your face you're not happy. Okay, make it clear you're not happy. Quick tip, if you want to challenge somebody, ask questions. Don't tell them that they've been out of order. Ask them. So did you think that was appropriate? Or did you mean to say that? Was that something that you intended to say? Did you really want to use that tone of voice, or was that accidental? Because I think that was how it landed. So just ask people's questions. It builds your power and it makes them kind of answer you, and it stops them getting defensive in many situations. So your first D is direct action. Your second D, if you don't want to choose direct action, is distraction. Cause the distraction, change the subject, interrupt what's going on, ask what the time is, ask to borrow a pen, say, I'm sorry, I've just got to take this, and take a fake phone call, put it up to your ear, walk away, count to 5, come back, say, sorry about that, where were we? Anything where you can say, where were we, means you can reset the situation and then move on. My tip is to distract really obviously, so that everyone knows that it's an obvious distraction, and then you're not really asking what the time is or whatever. And it does a really good job. It buys you a bit of time so your brain can catch up, but it also delivers what we call a soft blow to the perpetrator, saying, look, this is me reacting to what you did just then. It shows I'm capable of reacting, and next time I might not be so generous. Okay, so that's your second option, distraction. Your third option is delegation. Let me clear up the meaning. It doesn't mean give it to the junior person. It means tell somebody else, but with a view to them taking some form of action. Okay, just could be formal, might be escalate it, go and report it to someone senior or HR, but it could also be informal, asking a friend, look, can you come to this next meeting with me in case I need support, if I need to call that behavior out, or if I need to just say, look, it felt inappropriate to me. Another good tip there, that felt inappropriate to me, that felt aggressive to me, because you're in charge of how you feel and it's less of an accusation. Delegation, just ask somebody to help you out. Use your circle of influence. Maybe someone can have a word with the person on your behalf because they are friendly with them. Maybe they go out for a drink sometimes or something like that. Your third option is delegation. Your fourth option, final one, is delay. It's the one that I think is the most undervalued, if you ask me, because there is this myth that if you don't raise an objection there and then it's too late. You've missed your moment, that ship sailed. Let me just tell you, no, it hasn't, because number one, look, sometimes we make big decisions slowly, right? We're just human. Sometimes we need to sleep on it or take some advice or pluck up the courage even. It's perfectly fine to say, something happened last week, it bothered me. Something happened the week before, it bothered me. It's never too late to speak up, and don't let anyone ever tell you, well, you didn't say so at the time, so your words are no longer valid. You're in charge of your own words. You're in charge of when they're valid and when they're not. Okay, so you've got your 4 Ds, direct action, distraction, delegation, and delay. Quick exercise. Now it's going to do some polling. So I'm going to read you a scenario. Scenario number 1. After that, I'm going to ask for the poll. And here we go. You witness a senior manager in the corridor shouting at a more junior member of staff. This isn't the first time you've witnessed this. The manager is known for losing their temper, especially when stressed. They do, however, always apologize later. The manager is very high profile and successful, and everyone in the department, including the director, knows about their behavior, but has not challenged this. The junior member of staff is known to have performance issues. Go on to the poll and just give me which D, individually, everybody, you would choose. Would you choose direct action? Would you choose distraction? Would you choose delegation or delay? And I'm going to give you 10 seconds, okay, to give me the result of your decision. Don't think too much. Just choose which one feels right to you. You're going to take direct action. You're going to challenge it. You're going to cause a distraction, interrupt what's going on. You're going to delegate, tell somebody else formally or informally, or are you going to delay and just take some time out, have a think, maybe sleep on it? Okay, so 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see the results of the poll, please. And look at that. The winner clearly is delegation. So most of you, not most of you, almost half of you are going to delegate either informally or formally. Second, a strong second is a distraction. You're going to cause a disruption somehow, which may then mean you follow up with another D, by the way. It doesn't have to be just the one D. You can put them in sequence. You can create a strategy by thinking of what your Ds are and putting them in a particular order. And then after that comes delay. And the one that was the least popular there, understandably, is direct action. It's a senior manager, of course, understandable. But you might be a senior manager, of course. The correct answer, of course, is that it depends, right? There's no right or wrong. It depends on who you are. It depends on who the other people are. It depends on your mood at the time, because we make different decisions based on how we feel. There is no right or wrong. Don't think about what you should be doing. Think about which D you could be choosing. It's about could and not should. All right, there's no right or wrong. There's no such thing as the wrong D. If you pick a D and it doesn't work, just pick another one after that. Okay, and see if that works. You've got 4. All right, let's have another go. I'm going to move on to my next scenario, and I'm going to ask you the same question. I'll read it out. You've just got a new job within the company, but in another department, you're shocked by the working environment where one individual constantly swears and makes jokes about different cultures and religions, which makes you very uncomfortable. They also tell homophobic jokes. You're aware a colleague in the team is gay, but not openly, and they always look away when this happens. Other colleagues do not seem to be bothered, and some even join in. The environment is a happy one, and everyone gets along. The person telling the jokes is openly gay and very popular. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's see the results of the poll, and let's see what it is. There isn't a result of the poll. Hello, do we have any results of the poll? Maybe you're all a bit slow on typing. Do we have any results of the poll? Looks like we don't have a result of that poll, but that doesn't matter, because I'm sure that whatever you put is the right answer, because it does depend. Okay, so the main thing is if you pick a D, it means you're probably going to do something as opposed to doing nothing. And that's the whole point of using the 4 Ds. Okay, if we can go back to the results of the poll, that would be great. I'll just have a quick look at them before we close. The point about it is that by picking a D, you're probably not going to freeze and do nothing. You're probably going to do something. And the most popular one there is direct action, followed by distraction, then delegation, then delay. So just it's the 4 Ds gives you a vocabulary to talk to yourself in, a language, so you can think logically instead of freezing and instead of doing nothing. Okay, the golden rule, please only intervene when it's safe to do so. Okay, no, you're no good as an active bystander if you're unconscious or worse. So please check your safety. This is largely about workplace behaviors. It's not about being a vigilante and tackling criminals in the streets. Okay, finally, I'm going to leave you with a thought. A couple of people, you may or may not have heard of them. Albert Einstein, I reckon you have. Charles Delin is a Canadian author. They're making 2 points there. They're not. They're making the same point. Okay, whichever one is the most meaningful quote to you, have a think about them both. Read them to yourself and say to yourself now, I'm either going for Charles Delin, the turquoise one, or the yellow one, Albert Einstein, because that might make you commit in the future to being what we call an active bystander, rather than someone who just stands passively by and lets things happen. Thank you very much.